Hello and welcome to this video on custom hooks in React, motivation and philosophy. In this video, we'll be tackling a real world problem using a custom hook. Now, uh, I don't want to quickly introduce you what is a custom hook, how do we use it, what are its characteristics. Instead, what I want to do in this video is give you a real world problem, give you the motivation behind it, the use case, that why we need it, and then we'll take it on from there. So let's get started. So we'll define a problem first. So imagine you have a, let's say you have a list of items. Let's call it item 1, item 2. And imagine that you have a long list. Make it, let's say 30. And also let's have index for this. Let's say this is index 0, index 1, and so on. Now, since this is a long list, if I want to view this list on a, let's say a website or a browser, it will be better if I view it some items at a time. So let's call this as the page size. Okay, so let's say that we want to view, 10 items at a time. So what we want to achieve is that item 1 till item 10 should be displayed, and then when we go to the next, then item 11 till item 20. So basically these first 10 items will belong to page 1, then page 2, and so on. So we could write a nice formula here as well, saying that the page is nothing but the index, that is f9, and then we divide this by the page size, is nothing but I9. And then finally we'll take the floor of this. Let's do it here. So we want to take the floor of this value, so it returns an integer, and then we just add 1 to it. So if we now fill this, and also this page size has to be a constant, so let's make it a static, and let's fill this out. So as you can see, items 1 through 10, as we predicted, it belongs to page 1, then 11 to 20 page 2, 21 till 30 page 3. And of course if I rename, let's say if I change this to 5, then we have first 5 items in page 1, and so on. So you get the idea here. So this concept is known as pagination, and that's what we'll be solving it using a custom hook. So I already have a server with me. I'm running it right here, and let me show you how it looks. So this is the response which I'm getting from the server. It has almost 15,000 entries of India zip codes. So let's take first 10 entries of this. So let's say that uh, if you want first 10 entries, then we'll go with offset is equal to 0 and count is equal to 10, or maybe it was size, it is equal to 10. Yeah, it was size. So this offset determines from where we are starting, and size determines from this particular offset how many entries you need. So for example, in our so in this case the offset is 0, and from there we need 10 items. So from 0 we need 10 items, so it will be these items. Now if I let's say increase the, if I want to fetch the next 10 items, then I'll just simply increase my offset to 10. So now it will fetch the next 10 items. So in this case our offset is 10, or index, the side index is same as the offset, and this page size is same as the size parameter which we are passing in our API, and it's 10 right in our API. So now if our offset is 10 and size is also 10, it will fetch the next 10 items. So this API is already there. So let's get started. So I'll just use a scaffold. Project name, so let's name it pagination, let's say. It will be a React project. We'll go with JavaScript. It's done. Cd pagination npm install. That went through, and then we will run it. So it's npm run. But let's run it from the Visual Studio, which I'll be opening now. Okay. And let's run this. Awesome. Let's check it out if it works. Nice, it works. So let me adjust this a bit. Also, let me open my console here so that we can see what's going on. And that's it. We can get started now. So let's open our app.jsx. Right. So I want to first get the data from the server. So for that, we'll be using the use effect hook. So let me import that. Once I have this, then I can say use effect. We'll pass in our function here, and for fetching the data, we'll create another async function. Let's call it, fetch data maybe. And what it does is it gets the data from the server. So we can use fetch for it. So we will say fetch the URL localhost 3000 slash India zip. Yeah, it's India zip. And since we want a size of 10, so we can say we want size is equal to 10, and let's say for now offset is equal to 0, just to make sure that this API is able to fetch these 10 values or not. Of course, we'll have to await it and store it in this result. And just for our understanding, let's log the result, see what we get. Mostly we'll have to parse it, right, in JSON. So let's call it data is equal to await result dot JSON, and then we can console log the data, and we can then call our fetch data, and this is looking good. So the reason we are using use effect is as soon as the page loads, we want this data to get loaded. Right, so let's get rid of this, save it, and we are able to see this, which is awesome. Now we would like to display this uh, data here. So for that we need to store this data. So for that we will use a use state. Let's call it yeah, we can call it data data set data use state, and initially let's take the data as an empty array. And once we have the data, instead of console logging it, we can call set data and we can set it. Right now, let's get rid of these values here, these elements. We'll have a very simple div, and that div, maybe it will contain a paragraph saying India zip codes. That's it, right? Yeah, works. And then we want to display the list. So let's make a unordered list, and then for every item we can then run a map. So we can say data dot map and the zip code, and this will, let's say, return, let's see, so it will return a uh, the office name of the zip code and the pin code itself, right? So it will return. So what I mean by that is, so this office name, so we want to display the office name, and then we want to show the pin code just below this. So we can use two paragraph tags here. We'll say zip code dot office name, and then similarly we can go with pin code. Let's see if this works. Okay, great. Okay, let's go with 5 elements for now. Yeah, so this is looking good. Uh, yes, so we need, since we are using the unordered list, we need the list item. So this should have been a list item tag. Yeah, this is much better now. So that is that. And uh, instead of P, let's rename it to, let's say, H3 maybe. Yeah, much better. Great. So now let's add some more state variables here. We can get rid of this count, we don't need it. So for instance, let's have a uh, previous and a next button over here, so that when you click on next, it should show the next 5 or 10 elements depending on what our page size is, right? So let's have that button here. Of course, we'll have it after the list, so it will be a button. Let's call it previous, and let's call this next. Awesome, we have a previous and next buttons. Now, as we saw here, we need to track that we are on which page currently, and then depending on that page, we can then either go back to this page, the previous page, or go back to the next page. So if we know which page we are currently displaying, and it's easy for us to go back or to go forward. So for that, we'll introduce another state variable, and we'll call it page. Very simple. So const page, set page, and we will set the page number to 1 because in the initially it will be the first page itself, right? Great. Now uh, we need to increment the page when the user clicks on the next or the previous button. So for that we have on click listener, so we can just say on click, and we will then create a function which will set the page, uh, it will set the page, it will take in the previous page, and it will return p plus 1, right? So this entire thing we can copy it quickly and then have it here, but this time it should be p minus 1. So we are clicking on previous and next, but it seems nothing is happening here. The reason being that our API is still at 0th offset and the size is 5. So we need to change this offset depending on what page we are now currently. So what we can do is we can say offset is equal to, and it should be offset should be equal to, let's see, so if you are on page number 1, then the offset should be 0, but if you are on page number 2, then the offset should be uh, the offset should be 5. So in that case, the offset can be calculated from the page and the page size, right? So that means we should, it will be better if we extract this page size also in our state. So const page size, set page size, use state, and let's make it 5 for now, and I'll convert this to a template string so that we can use a fancy syntax here. Let's call it page size, and the offset will be nothing but my current page minus 1, and we'll multiply this by the page size. So so give an example. So if we have page is equal to 2 and my page size is equal to 5, let's say, so in that case my offset will be calculated as uh, 2 minus 1 into 5, which is nothing but 5. So similarly, if my page was equal to 3, then my offset would have been 3 minus 1 into 5. So that will be 2 into 5, which is 10. So this is making sense. Hopefully this should work. And of course, offset we can place it here. Okay, this is looking good. Um, okay, let me save it. Let's see. Wow, so this seems to be working. We can quickly check. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So 7 is this 504103 pin code, and over here the 7th item is 50413. So this is matching with what we were expecting. So this is good. Now uh, the use effect hook also takes in a an array of dependencies. So we don't want it to call this API every time when something gets updated. So for that we will pass in the dependency list. So we'll pass in the page, of course, the page size. These two things we can pass in. So whenever these two uh, get changed, then we would like to call our API. Let's see if this still works. Yeah, and we can also fix the previous button here. It's still going to the previous button, but there is no data to show. So quickly what we can do is we can add a condition saying here that if my page is equal to 1, then just render null, otherwise render the button. And let's refresh this. Yeah, so now you can see the previous button is not there anymore. Once I go to the next, then the previous button is visible. If I click here, again this vanishes. So this is working as expected. Uh, let's see. So now uh, consider a scenario where I want another list to have the same pagination rules that we had here. The same pagination logic which we have used here, I wanted to apply those exactly on some other list, let's say. So in that case, what can I do? So let's see what will happen if I just, copy paste this. Maybe we'll have to do some formatting here. So let's say if I copy this entire div, let's say, and paste it here, and also let's add another parent div because we should return just a single element. Let's save it. Okay, so it displayed here, but I wanted it to display side by side. So let's see if we can quickly fix that. Let's see. So if I give it a style of display flex, will it work? And then here, yeah, okay. Let's see if this works. Wow, it vanishes. Okay. Anyways, let's look at this. So now I have another API. Instead of India zip, it is US zip, and that API also accepts the offset and the uh, size parameters. So let me quickly show you that. So if I say new tab, and then instead of saying India zip, let's make it US zip. So now we can see it has a different structure. It has a city name and then it has a underscore ID as its pin code. So what I want to do is I want to add another US zip code here. So instead of India, I'll say US zip codes, and then I want to use this exact same logic. So as it stands now, if I want to use it, then I'll have to copy these properties, this entire thing I have to copy, and then I have to rename it. And then wherever I'm using, let's say data, I'll have to rename it to data 1, data 2, page 1, page 2, to keep track of the pages for both of them. Why? Because now if I click on next here, both of them will get changed, but I want to make these two independent of each other. So that's why. So for that, uh, what we can do is we can extract out this into another function. Let's call it function use pagination, and then let's paste it here. And since the URL is different here, right, so we can accept the URL as a parameter here. So let's accept the URL as the parameter, and let's replace this entire thing with the URL variable. And then here we can delete all of these values, and we can call this use pagination with this URL. Now we still need access to the set page and also the page variables, because we are using it here, and also the data. So let's return that. So let's return the data, page, and set page. So if we do that, then we can accept those here, data, page, and set page. And let's see if this still works. And now uh, let's call this data 1, page 1, set page 1, data 1, page 1, set page 1, and let's copy this, and instead of India zip we'll make it US zip, and data 2, page 2, set page 2, and instead of data we'll make it 2 everywhere, and this should work. This format document, and so we are not able to see any data here. The reason being that since I showed you that it contains the data in different format. So instead of office name it has a city, I believe, and instead of pin code it has underscore ID. So now if we, yeah, and now these buttons are independent of each other, right? Next, next. So once if you click next, this doesn't get changed, right? The data still remains same in the US, and similarly here. So what we have done here is we have created a custom hook here. So this use pagination is our custom hook, and hopefully you can appreciate that why we used it and how it makes our life very easy. So to summarize, what we have done here is we initially proposed a real world problem of pagination, and then we were able to solve it using the combination of use state and use effect hooks, and those uh, and that combination we encapsulated in another hook which was our custom hook, and we called it use pagination. And we could even go one step further and customize it further. We could even add a drop down here saying that what is the page size you want, And then depending on what user selects, we could also change the page size, because we haven't used this function yet, set page size. A lot of things can be done here. uh, Similarly, if we know what is the total count of the elements of this list, then we could also, instead of showing previous and next, we could show first and last buttons as well. It will directly go to that particular offset, depending on last, whether the first or last button is activated.